Aldous Grant was 38 years old when he was discharged from Baptist Medical Center in Memphis on a Tuesday morning in March after 11 days recovering from a ruptured appendix. And the first thing he noticed when his brother pulled into the driveway was that the workshop door was standing open in a way it was never left standing open. He asked his brother to stop the car. He got out before the car had fully stopped moving. He walked across the gravel to the workshop, the 40 by 60-foot metal building at the back of the property that he had built 8 years ago and fitted over the following years with the precision equipment that was the true infrastructure of his professional life. And he stood in the doorway and looked at what was inside, which was almost nothing. The floor was clean. The workbenches were bare. The wall racks where his tooling had hung in the organized silence of a man who believed that a tool returned to the right place was a tool ready to work were stripped to the painted concrete behind them. The CNC lathe, the 3-axis mill, the surface grinder, the full Starrett precision measurement set that had belonged to his father, the hand tools accumulated across 17 years of machining, the specialty tooling for aerospace grade work that had taken 12 years to source and calibrate. All of it was gone. His wife had held a sale while he was in the hospital. 2 days, the neighbors would later tell him, both weekend days, advertised in the paper, while Algis had a drainage tube in his side and an IV in his arm, and the honest assumption that the person he had married was at least capable of the minimum decency of waiting. What Lena Grant had no idea about, what she had never asked and he had never volunteered, was what those tools were actually worth, and what they represented in terms of what he had been building, quietly and without announcement, for the better part of a decade. She had sold his tools. She was about to find out what that cost. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning light fell across the workshop floor in long diagonals through the south-facing skylight, the way it fell on any good day, catching the dust suspended in the air above the machining centers and turning it briefly gold before it settled. Aldous was at the surface plate, a heavy cast iron reference surface, ground flat to within 3/10,000ths of an inch, the one tool in the shop he trusted more than any other, because it never lied. He was checking the squareness of a fixture he had been building for a precision aerospace sub-assembly contract, running a granite square along the reference edge, noting the light gap with the unhurried attention of a man who had learned long ago that most of the errors in machining happened not in the cutting, but in the measuring, and that the measuring had to be done with complete patience and no assumptions. He had built the workshop the summer after his father died. That was the sequence he always remembered. The inheritance, which was not large in money terms, but was specific in tool terms, and the workshop, which was the only proper home for what he had received. His father, Leonard Grant, had been a toolmaker in the Chrysler plants for 31 years, and he had accumulated precision instruments the way some men accumulated books, deliberately, selectively, with the understanding that a good measuring tool was worth any number of cutting tools, because it was the thing that told you the truth about everything else. Leonard had told him once, when Algis was 20 and learning to read a micrometer, son, the cutting is the easy part. The measuring is the discipline. You have to be willing to find out what's actually there, even when you were hoping for something different. He had died at 68, 2 years after retirement, and the Starrett set had come to Aldous in a locked case with a handwritten inventory on a folded sheet of legal paper in Leonard's precise handwriting. Aldous had read the inventory 3 times before he opened the case. He had known, then, the weight of what he was holding. He had met Lena Beaumont 4 years into his time in Memphis, at a neighborhood block party in the Orange Mound section of the city, where he had bought the property specifically for the workshop footprint available behind the house. She was warm and sociable, and she had found his quiet manner either charming or manageable. He had not always been sure which, and she had asked him once, early in the courtship, what he did in that building all those hours. He had shown her. She had looked at the equipment with the polite incomprehension of someone reviewing an exhibit in a museum of an unfamiliar culture, and had said it looked complicated, and had changed the subject. He had proposed the following spring in the kitchen of the house, after a Sunday dinner she had cooked, and she had said yes with warmth that he had not doubted at the time. He had not doubted it for a while. The workshop was the thing that had always created the friction, not dramatically, but consistently. The way a worn bearing created friction, barely perceptible at first, and then impossible to ignore. It was the hours he spent in it. It was the weekends. It was the way the work demanded a quality of attention that left nothing over for the social obligations she had assembled and prioritized. He understood that she found the imbalance difficult. He had not found a way to explain to her that the work was not a preference. It was the architecture of everything else. On the pegboard beside the workshop door, he had mounted a small, framed card that his father had given him the year before he died. A single typed sentence. A tool in its right place is a tool ready to serve. He had put it there, so he would read it every time he entered and every time he left. It had been there for 7 years. Only his accountant, his patent attorney, and the 3 aerospace primes he held active contracts with knew the full valuation of what that workshop represented. The tools themselves, the certifications attached to them, the contracts in place, and the precision machining business he had built around them into something his accountant had certified, in the prior quarter's review, at just over $940,000. Not the tools alone. The business the tools made possible. She had never asked about the business. She had never asked about the contracts. He came in from the workshop one evening to find Lena in the kitchen, on a call she did not end when he entered, with her phone angled away from him in the practiced way of a person who has been making private calls for long enough to have developed a technique for them. He poured water. He asked how her day had been. She answered at the appropriate length, ending her call with the smoothness of someone who had developed a technique for that as well. On the side counter, her car keys sat beside a business card he had not seen before. He noted the name on it as he passed and did not ask about it. He went back to the workshop. He wrote the name down. 3 weeks later, he was in the hospital, and the workshop was empty. He stood in the doorway for a long time after his brother parked the car. His brother, Deshaun, stood beside him and was wise enough to say nothing for the first full minute. Then, Aldous walked in. He walked the perimeter of the workshop the way he walked the perimeter of any floor he was assessing, systematically, from one end to the other, reading what had been there from the marks on the floor and the shadows on the walls and the bare hooks on the pegboard. The framed card was still there. That was the only thing still there. He took his phone from his jacket pocket. He photographed every wall, every workbench surface, every bare hook and empty floor mounting point. He photographed the concrete where the CNC lathe had sat, 4 anchor bolt holes filled now with the shadows of recently removed hardware. He photographed the surface plate, which was still there because it weighed 600 pounds and apparently had not moved easily enough for a weekend sale. He photographed the pegboard with its bare hooks and the framed card hanging alone at the end of it. His face remained perfectly calm. He called his accountant from the driveway. He described what he was looking at. He asked her to pull the most recent equipment certification and tool valuation from the prior quarter's review. She came back to him in 4 minutes with the number, $416,000 in certified tool and equipment value. Alone, before the contracts, before the business goodwill. before the precision calibrations attached to individual pieces that could not be replicated without recertification at aerospace-grade standards, a process that took months and cost tens of thousands per instrument. He had been hospitalized for 11 days. She had held a sale for 2. He moved with the same deliberate calm that defined everything he did when the situation was serious. He went inside the house. He sat at the kitchen table. Lena was not home. He opened his laptop and went directly to the joint savings account, the one they had maintained for household expenses. He had not reviewed it in the weeks before his hospitalization, and the prior 3 months had been occupied with the contract work that had kept him in the workshop until late in the evenings. What he found in those 3 months was a pattern he recognized the way a machinist recognized a bad finish, not from a single mark, but from a cumulative texture of decisions. 11 withdrawals, ranging from $400 to $2,600, all made between the date of his hospital admission and the prior week. Total, $19,200. 2 of the withdrawals were dated the weekend of the sale itself. She had not paid him for the tools. She had sold them and kept the proceeds and withdrawn another $19,000 from their shared account. He also found, in the account history, 3 separate payments to a storage facility he did not recognize, made in the 6 weeks before his hospitalization. He found a change of address form in the kitchen drawer, printed, but not yet mailed, with a different address filled in, one he did not recognize, in a neighborhood he associated with a category of living arrangement he understood the implication of immediately. She had been planning to leave before he went to the hospital. She had simply used the 11 days to move faster. He opened a new folder on his desktop. He named it The Measure. He picked up the secondary phone, the one registered to the machining business entity, the one his aerospace clients and his patent attorney used to reach him, and made the call he had been building toward since he stood in the empty doorway. He met with his attorney, Henrietta Cross, the following morning in her office in downtown Memphis. Henrietta was 58 years old, a property and business law attorney who had represented the machining business's interests since its incorporation, and who had the particular quality of a person who processed extraordinary information with complete professional stillness. He placed the equipment certification on her desk. The tool valuation summary, the joint account withdrawal history, the storage facility payments, the change of address form, the name from the business card he had noted 3 weeks before his hospitalization, a name her paralegal had confirmed within an hour of the prior evening's call, belonged to a man named Curtis Vale, a sales manager at a commercial equipment brokerage whose firm specialized in, among other things, the acquisition and resale of precision machining equipment. Henrietta reviewed every document without expression. She was very still for a moment when she reached the equipment valuation. $416,000, she said. Before the contracts, Aldous said. The business itself, including the 3 active aerospace primes and the precision certifications, was valued at $940,000 in the last quarterly review. I have the accountant's certification. Henrietta set the page down. She looked at him over her reading glasses with the expression of a woman who had spent 30 years watching people miscalculate. She sold $416,000 worth of certified precision equipment at a weekend yard sale. She did, without your knowledge or consent, while you were hospitalized. Yes, and took the proceeds, along with the $19,200 from the joint account. Henrietta was quiet for a long moment. The machining equipment, she said carefully, held under the business entity, is not marital property subject to casual disposal by either party. It is business property. The sale, to the extent she sold equipment belonging to a registered business entity, was not hers to conduct. She paused. Curtis Vale's brokerage likely has the equipment, or has already sold it forward. We can trace it. The prenuptial agreement covers the business entity and its assets as premarital property. The sale itself constitutes unlawful conversion of business assets. That is a separate claim from the divorce proceedings. She picked up her pen. This is not complicated. Legally, it is simply going to require documentation and patience. Aldous nodded. One more thing, he said. He placed the name from the business card on the desk. I want to know the full relationship between Curtis Vale and my wife before we file. Henrietta wrote it down. She told him she would have everything by end of week. Tools were meant to work, not shine. So was the truth, in the right hands. He drove to Germantown on a Saturday afternoon to see his mother's younger sister, Aunt Cecile, who was 70 and had been a bookkeeper for a commercial firm for 35 years, and who had the accountant's habit of thinking about everything in terms of what the record showed and what it didn't. She lived in a house she had owned for 22 years, and she met Aldous at the door with the expression of someone who had heard enough of the story secondhand from Deshawn to know the shape of what was coming. They sat in the front room with sweet tea and the late afternoon light coming through the blinds in parallel lines, and Aldous told her everything. The hospital, the empty workshop, the sale, the account withdrawals, the change of address form, Curtis Vale. Cecile listened with her hands folded in her lap. She was quiet for a long time when he finished. She sold your father's tools, she said. He had not said that specifically. But she had arrived at the correct weight of the thing. The Starrett set, he said. Cecile was quiet again. She looked at the window. Your father worked 31 years to put that set together, she said. He brought it to you because he knew you understood what it was for. She turned and looked at Aldous with the direct regard of a woman who had always been clearer about values than about feelings. What was in that case wasn't money. It was a standard. Your father's standard of what good work required. She paused. She sold his standard at a yard sale. Aldous looked at his hands. What does your attorney say? Cecile asked. That the sale was unlawful. That we can trace the equipment and pursue recovery. That the prenuptial agreement is clean. Cecile nodded. Then you do that. All of it. And you do it without anger. She picked up her tea. Your father would have said the same thing he always said. The measuring is the discipline. Find out what's actually there. Don't hope for something different. She set the cup down. The record is going to say what it says. You don't need to add anything to it. By the following Thursday, Henrietta's office had confirmed the Curtis Vale connection. He and Lena had been in contact for 11 months. The phone records made it unambiguous. And Vale's brokerage had received the machining equipment on both sale days and had already begun moving the most portable items to secondary buyers. His precision measurement instruments, including 3 pieces from the Starrett set, had been sold to a machine shop in Olive Branch at a combined price of $1,200. $1,200. For instruments that Henrietta's valuation expert had certified at $68,000. The full accounting, equipment sold, proceeds pocketed, joint account withdrawals, and Vale's brokerage receipts totaled $471.00 in converted assets over the period of the hospitalization and the preceding weeks of preparation. Real power operated in quiet rooms and in the records that told the truth about what had happened in them. The reckoning came in a conference room in downtown Memphis on a Wednesday morning in May, with Henrietta on one side of the table and Lena's attorney, a man named Burrell, who had taken the case and had spent the preceding week requesting continuances as the documentation assembled itself into a picture he had not anticipated when he filed. On the other, Lena arrived composed, in the way she was always composed at formal proceedings, the composure of a woman who had convinced herself that what she had done was defensible, or at minimum navigable. She sat down across from Algis and looked at him briefly, and looked away. Henrietta placed the first document on the table. It was the prenuptial agreement, signed, witnessed, covering the machining business entity, its equipment, its contracts, and all pre-marital assets and their derivative growth. Burrell had a copy. He had read it. His expression said he had read it several times and had found the language as clean as Henrietta had promised. The second document was the equipment certification and valuation summary. $416,000 in certified precision machining equipment, itemized, photographed, insured, registered to the business entity. The third document was Henrietta's valuation expert's report on the full business, the aerospace contracts, the certifications, the goodwill. $940,000. Certified, dated, filed. The fourth document was the brokerage receipt from Curtis Vale's firm, the equipment received on the sale days, the amounts paid, the subsequent forward sales to secondary buyers. $1,200 for the 3-Starrett Precision Instruments. Totals that added up to roughly 4% of certified value across the board. The fifth document was the joint account withdrawal history. $19,200. Dated, sourced, 2 withdrawals made on the days of the sale itself. The sixth document was the phone record summary. 11 months of contact between Lena and Curtis Vale, dated and time-stamped, mapped against the sale preparation timeline. Lena looked at the sixth document for a long time. Burrell placed a hand on the table between them, not on her arm, but on the table, which was slightly different, and which Aldis read as the gesture of an attorney who had run out of private communications and was now operating in the open. Lena's composure had held through 5 documents. It did not hold through 6. She turned to Aldis. She said his name. Then she said that she had not understood what she was selling, that she had believed the tools were simply tools, that she had not known what they were worth or what the business was worth, that she had been frightened and had made decisions she would not have made if she had been thinking clearly. Aldis listened to all of it. He waited until she had finished. "You sold my father's tools," he said, quietly and without emphasis. "I want you to understand that I know the dollar amount. I know the provenance. I know what those instruments were and where they came from and what they represented." He paused. "I am not going to ask you to understand that the way I understand it. That would be asking too much." He looked at her with the steady attention he brought to everything that needed to be measured accurately. "But the record shows what happened. Henrietta has the full recovery claim documented. Your attorney has seen all of it. The numbers are what they are." He stood. He picked up the framed card from the table in front of him. He had brought it because it had been the only thing left in the workshop, and because it had belonged to his father before it belonged to him, and because its place was not in an empty room. And he put it in his jacket pocket. He buttoned the jacket. He nodded to Henrietta. He walked out of the conference room and into the hallway and through the building's lobby and out into the May morning air, and he stood on the sidewalk and let the warmth of it settle around him. He was finished with what needed finishing. 10 months had passed like a long, unhurried river by the time Algis stood at the surface plate in the workshop on a Saturday morning, running a precision square along the reference edge of a new fixture he was building for the first contract with a new aerospace prime, a contract he had secured in the fall, 3 months after the dissolution was finalized, on the strength of the certifications his attorney had helped him recover and restore. The dissolution had concluded in August. The conversion claim, unlawful sale of business assets without consent, had been settled in June, separately from the divorce proceedings, with a recovery agreement that accounted for the full certified value of what had been sold, and an additional sum for the calibration and replacement costs of the precision instruments that could not be reacquired at their original standard. The Starrett set from the Olive Branch machine shop had been recovered through Henrietta's investigative work and a negotiated buyback. All 3 recovered instruments now back in the locked case on the shelf his father had built for them, exactly where they had always been. The settlement had cost Lena the equity in the house she had moved into with Curtis Vale and a portion of her own savings, which the court had found appropriate given the nature and documentation of the conversion. Curtis Vale's brokerage had faced a separate professional inquiry from the state licensing board for having purchased equipment from a non-owner without proper title verification. He had relocated his operations to a different county. Their relationship had not survived the proceedings. Aldous had heard all of this through Henrietta, who reported facts without commentary, which was the only way he wanted to receive them. He had met Josephine at a precision manufacturing conference in Huntsville in the late spring, where she had been presenting on quality management systems for aerospace sub-tier suppliers. She was a metrology engineer, a specialist in the science of measurement itself, the discipline of determining what was actually there rather than what you estimated or hoped, and she had asked him about his calibration protocols with the focused interest of someone who understood exactly why those protocols mattered and what happened when they were wrong. She was here now, in the house, making coffee in the kitchen the way she did on Saturdays, and he could hear the familiar sounds of her morning and found them honest and steady and exactly what he wanted to hear. He ran the granite square along the reference edge one more time. The light gap was 0. The fixture was true. Some things, when they were built right and measured right and cared for with the discipline they required, simply were what they were. He was free. He was working. The standard was his own. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.